Hello again, Brad here. Today we are on Lesson 6, Chapter 6, working with fonts, text blocks, lists, and tables. Hopefully you read Chapter 6, or you will read Chapter 6. In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to use bold, italic, and special formatting. We're going to talk about how to tweak the font on your web page, how to use special characters. We're going to learn about aligning text on a page. We're going to talk about the 3 types of HTML lists. We're going to learn how to nest a list within a list. We'll learn how to create tables in HTML. We're going to learn how to control the size of tables. We're going to learn how to align content and span rows and columns within tables. And we're going to talk about how to use CSS columns. So when the book talks about special characters, for example, if you ever seen a website and at the bottom there was a copyright and it was that C symbol inside a circle, well, that's a special character. And there are a lot of special characters, or there's a handful. And in the beginning of chapter 6, your book goes through a table and it shows you. You can insert these characters at any point in an HTML document by using the appropriate codes. And all these codes and their names are listed in that table. HTML uses a special code known as a character entity to represent special characters, such as the copyright symbol and the trademark symbol. And another example of a case when we would need special characters is, say we want to put a greater than or less than sign, angle brackets, quotation marks, or an ampersand inside our code. Well, technically, the browser, it would render that as an HTML and it would see it as code. So in order to avoid it being rendered as HTML code, we have to use these special characters to display the symbols we want. That way it's not interpreted as part of our code. There is a CSS style rule called font weight, where you can set the weight or boldness of a font by using a style rule. Standard settings include normal, bold, bolder, and lighter, with normal being the default. Italic text is controlled via font style rule, which is normal, italic, or oblique. You can specify the rules together as well if you want to apply more than one rule. The book shows you a good example of this. Oh, and there is my dog, by the way. So if you want a little bit more control over the font than just making it bold or italic, you can use the font family style rule to set the typeface used to display text. And you can use the font size and color style rules to control the size and color of your fonts. Something new to HTML5 when you're using web fonts is the font face rule, which enables you to define font for use in your HTML markup so that they are displayed to users regardless of whether they have those installed on their computers. So you're able to use any type of font and have it stored on your server. Alternatively, instead of storing different font files on your web server, you can use Google Fonts, which is free, and you just have it to add a link in the head of your document and link to whatever they provide. And then you can use a whole new array of fonts using your font face rule. We're also going to learn about the text align style rule, which allows you to align our HTML block elements to the left, middle, right, and so on. The book illustrates this really well and shows you an example of using text align left, text align center, and text align right, where you can see 3 different paragraphs, one all the way on the left of the page, one in the middle, and one aligned all the way on the right of the page. The 3 types of HTML lists are ordered, unordered, and definition. I don't use definition lists that much. In my experience as a web developer, I find myself using an ordered list or unordered list quite often and styling them a lot. An ordered list is an indented list, and it has numbers or letters before each list item. You use the OL tag to open it, and each element or each line inside that list has to be enclosed in the LI opening and LI closing tags. For an unordered list, you use the UL tags to begin and end your list. And in between, same as the ordered list, you use the LI tags to enclose each list item. So for making an ordered or unordered list with 3 items, each of those 3 items has to have an opening LI tag and a closing LI tag. There are examples of this in your book, also in the PowerPoint presentation that's coming up next. You'll see that you can nest the list inside of a list. You can have a list where the first line of that list is another list, and the second line of that list is another list. And you can embed a list inside a list inside a list. You can have nest multiple lists. So it can get a little complicated. So it's important to, write your code like I showed you. Always put the opening and closing tag and then add your content inside. You can style lists just like you would any other HTML element. Just like we learned how to style a paragraph or style a header, you can use inline styling, internal styling, or external styling, and you can give an ordered list or unordered list a class and style it that way. If you just want to style just that one specific list, you can add a style attribute and just say list style type upper alpha. Your book gives you an example of that and talks about that. Upper alpha will just make everything with capital letters instead of numbers. And another method for controlling the layout information within our web page is to display that information within a table. A table consists of rows of information with individual cells inside. Think of an Excel sheet. To make a table, we have to start with our table tag, our opening and closing table tag. And then the table tag, you need to place a TR tag, which is a table row, to create rows. So you have your table tags. Inside, you have a bunch of rows. Your first row is always going to be the TH, the table header. And then every other row after that is going to be the TD, or table data. The PowerPoint slide has an example of how to make a simple table. The book gives you a really good style sheet set of entries to add that provides a basic border around the table and its cells. It also gives you a way to specify these styles. You will notice in that example in your book, it creates a 1 pixel solid black border around your table. But then it introduces a new style rule that we haven't seen, border-collapse. The border collapse property, with the value collapse, it makes all the borders of the table, the TR, the TH, and the TD elements collapse into one shared border. That way, in between cells, we don't have multiple borders and multiple lines. It would look really messy if we did not put border collapse and set that value to collapse. If you want, you can try it without that style rule and see what it looks like, and then put it back. You can control the table size. By default, a table size will automatically expand to fit the data that it has in it. But if you set your table width in the table tag as a style to 100%, it'll fill the entire width of the browser. You can also set each cell in the table to a certain width. There's an example in the book where the first cell is set to a width of 20% and the second cell is set to a width of 80%. And when you use percentages instead of pixels, your table will resize automatically to fit any size browser window. Keeping the structure of a table's rows and columns all organized in your mind can be really difficult. Because the thing is, the smallest little error, missing one little tag or one thing at a line, can throw the whole table off and mess the whole thing up. So if you sketch or jot down or write down the structure especially if your table is a little bit more complicated. It can help you visualize the whole thing before you add it into your HTML code. At the end of chapter 6, it talks about using CSS columns. If you have a lot of text information that you want to present to readers on your screen, you can use CSS columns. It presents the information kind of like how a newspaper is. You can have 2, 3, 4, multiple number of columns.